Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our mission is to engage, inspire, and empower the global community of risk practitioners. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and today I'm just fired up to welcome my guest, Jonathan Kendler. He is a seasoned and highly accomplished professional in the medical device human factors space, and I'm so looking forward to having a conversation with Jonathan about human factors and usability, especially in light of so much happening in our world from a technology point of view, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and what the future of human factors engineering looks like. I'm really excited to hear that. But I want to welcome all of you. And as you are settling down, please know that this is a very casual conversation. It's not a webinar or a lecture. You're all invited to participate. So with that, Jonathan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Naveen. I'm doing well, and thank you for the kind introduction.
So, Jonathan, I'm very curious to start by asking you to share your career journey with us a little bit. I think you have had a pretty unconventional path to the world of medical devices, coming from the fine arts background. Share with us how you landed in medical devices.
That's true. And I've landed in medical devices almost by accident. My initial interest when I was much younger, in my undergraduate days, was in the visual arts. I studied graphic design, photography, and animation. And it was only in my last semester of my undergraduate degree where I had to fit one course into my studies. And the only course that was available at the time slot that I had to fill was a course on software user interface design, which I confess did not interest me much at the time, but I signed up for it. The professor of the course was Michael Wickland, who some of the people in the audience might know. And he ended up giving me my first job after university. He himself had done a lot of work in human factors, especially in the medical device industry. And he became my mentor at the time, later on became my business partner as well. And it was through him that I saw how design, when applied to medical devices, really had an ability to make a significant impact in terms of improving people's lives in a way that designing websites or designing posters can't achieve. And that really inspired me and led me down the path of medical device design and human factors for the last 24 years at this point.
Oh, this is so fascinating how your whole career trajectory can change just by exposure to, a simple course or one individual, one person, how it can change your perspective. So thank you for sharing that story with us. Now, I want to set the stage for our audience for our conversation today, because as we know, more than 1,000 medical devices, which are based on artificial intelligence or machine learning, have been cleared or approved by the US FDA. And this trend is only going to continue. This is coming at us at a very fast pace. Technology has changed quite a lot. And in this changing world, Jonathan, share with us, first of all, what you see from your perspective, some of the emerging challenges for human factors engineering.
Sure. To be honest, I see things from two slightly contradictory perspectives, because on the one hand, I think that many of the challenges that medical device designers and manufacturers are facing with AI-enabled products are the same ones that they've faced with conventional products, meaning that a lot of the fundamental human factors work that has to be done in terms of understanding users and their needs, understanding the use environments, understanding the types of risks that can occur and the harms that can occur as a result of those risks. They're still dealing with a lot of those challenges that they haven't really mastered for conventional products. They're equally applicable to AI-enabled devices. And many of the devices that utilize AI technology actually rely on similar interaction patterns and workflows that have been around for a long time. So on the one hand, we're dealing with a lot of the same challenges. And unless manufacturers and development teams and quality and regulatory teams focus on the fundamental quality work of human factors, they're going to keep having issues regardless of whether or not the product involves AI or not. So that's my view half the time. The other half of the time, I feel that we are embarking on a real paradigm shift in terms of how people interact with technology and how people think about technology, because there are significant changes happening in terms of how people come to rely, both clinicians and patients, rely on what it is that the medical devices can do. And that can affect the level of trust that they have in the product that they're working with and the level of vigilance that they might apply when they're working with the product. And so depending on the particular use case, I think the introduction of AI can introduce novel risks and new safety issues that were maybe less prevalent in more conventional medical devices.
Yes, I like the way you have framed this because to some extent, the fundamental principles are not changing. It's just that the environment in which we have to apply them is changing. And that calls us to be a little bit more careful and vigilant, maybe more cross-functional collaboration. But can you share with us an example of an unforeseen or a new risk that in your mind is emerging when it comes to AI ML-enabled devices?
Sure. So probably one of the most common ones that I've been seeing across different AI-enabled devices is a lack of transparency around what the AI is actually doing. Because there is, I think, a tendency amongst companies to try and present AI as an almost magic-like ability to quickly go from a text prompt to a remarkable output. And with medical devices, when you present those types of interactions as magic, it can lead to confusion or misunderstanding of what the device is actually doing, what it might be analyzing, and how it is intended to help the clinician or the patient. So, for example, devices that don't provide a clear indication of how the AI is analyzing, let's say, an ultrasound image, or how it might be analyzing an X-ray image, and what type of information it's providing to the user. If it's not providing, for example, some sort of confidence level, it becomes much more difficult for the clinician to be able to work with the information that the AI-enabled system is providing. So I think transparency is one of the most common issues that I've been seeing.
And that's an interesting point to some extent. I think it makes a lot of sense, although I'm wondering if there would be a difference between if the output is I'm 90% confident that this particular section of the image is potentially problematic, or let's say maybe indication of a cancer type of a cell, or I'm 95% confident. Is there, of course, an expert clinician has to exercise their judgment. And one of the things that I've heard reading a lot of de novos from FDA, they themselves have identified a risk of clinicians over-relying on the output. So I wonder, if there's a minimum bar that these applications have to cross, let's say 85%, 90% sensitivity, specificity, and after that, it's kind of good enough. And then people just begin to rely that. So talk to us in terms of how we can help clinicians still be mindful of the judgment they have to make without overwhelming them with too much information.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there is a tendency that I've seen amongst the medical device manufacturers to really focus a lot on the accuracy and the likely success rates that their AI or ML systems will have. And I think that can sometimes send them down the wrong path, because instead, if you focus on assuming that there will be mistakes and failures that the AI can make, the question then becomes, how do we best communicate that to the users? How do we best convey to the user what the AI is doing, where it might go wrong, and what is the user's responsibility in terms of checking the AI's work or complementing what the AI is doing? And so I think the correct step to take is to focus more on what type of conversation can we have with the user through the user interface to make sure that they're still vigilant to the important details. Sometimes it can be a matter of highlighting part of the AI's analysis or requiring the user to check certain details in the outcome before they can proceed, so that we prevent the user from getting into a kind of habituation where they just blindly accept what the AI is doing.
We have an interesting question from Dr. Dagash here. He's asking, will use of AI tools have their own instructions for use for both the verbatim interpretation and the regulatory one? Kind of a surgical technique document outside of the IFU. Very interesting. You have any thoughts to share on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think actually that the area of instructions and training is one of the areas that's going to benefit the most from AI. And it's been a little bit overlooked. I feel like it hasn't received quite as much attention in terms of how AI can really benefit clinician and overall user interactions with medical devices. Because as you know, training is one of the elements that manufacturers rely on to ensure that users operate devices correctly, at least in theory. In practice, training is often imperfect. The quality isn't always great. It's not always provided in a consistent way. And the same can be said of labeling and instructions. I think there's a lot of potential for AI strengthened training to make information more accessible and more interactive in a way that could help users better understand devices both before they begin to interact with them and possibly also even during real-time use as well. So I think that is a really interesting area to keep an eye on.
So fascinating that you mentioned AI strengthened training. I'm very curious to hear a little bit more about that. Can you share any example that comes to mind, whether you have seen that in practice already or potentially could be implemented?
I haven't actually seen it in practice with medical products yet. I've seen some proof of concept demonstrations in other industries where, for example, instead of relying on an in-service video that's just a linear video that you have to watch from beginning to end, you might have some sort of multimodal engagement where you can communicate with an LLM to ask it clarifications about how a product is supposed to work. And then the LLM can ask you questions in return to confirm that you understand the instructions that it's provided. So I think uses of AI like that could help make training much more effective and potentially also traceable, but I haven't actually seen it in practice yet within the medical device industry.
Well, I think now that you explain it this way to me, Jonathan, it seems to me that we have an opportunity here to broaden our perspective on training itself, right? And I've thought about this for a while and I've talked about it. We have to move from the notion of training to competence. Training, sometimes, actually quite a lot of times, is seen as a check the box activity in our world. Just do it and move on. But competence is where we need to focus on, right? Can we actually do the job that we are supposed to do? Do we have enough skills? Have we experienced enough to be able to do that correctly? And I feel like an AI companion training or a competence building model could also be beneficial in addition to using AI for the actual work. So I feel like there's an opportunity here in terms of broadening our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's an area that doesn't get quite as much attention because it's not as flashy as some of the other roles that AI can serve. But I think in terms of providing actual benefit and ensuring that users are able to operate devices in a safe and effective way, I think there's a lot of promise there.
Wonderful. Awesome, guys. So my guest today is Jonathan Kendler, and we are talking about human factors engineering and usability, especially in this new environment we are living in where AI and ML is dominating so many applications. I invite you to participate in this conversation, share your thoughts, your questions, comments, your opinions. All opinions are welcome. How do you see the future of human factors and usability evolve in this new framework? What challenges and opportunities you see? All thoughts are welcome. So please continue to share that. Jonathan, let's continue our conversation here. Among all these applications that have been launched, I mentioned more than 1,000. Anything comes to your mind that you have been particularly excited about where AI ML is showing up?
Yeah, I think some of the applications that I've seen that have really been interesting, both in terms of what they can do from a user interaction perspective and also what they can do in terms of enhancing use safety and enhancing clinical outcomes, have probably been around surgical planning. I've worked on a few products where AI is used really to complement what the surgeon is doing. So helping them discover details in the images that they're working with, in some of the plans that they're putting together that are otherwise very difficult to detect manually. So it's uses where the AI is not replacing what the clinician is doing, but rather acting as a kind of strengthener of the clinician's abilities and skill and judgment. And that I find to be a very compelling and effective use case for AI.
I'm glad you mentioned that because there is so much going on in this whole area of what I have understood be something called digital twin. And I came across some examples where, let's say you are trying to do a TAVR operation or, another very complicated operation. Before you go into there, you can map the entire anatomy of the part, right? And you can actually simulate exactly how you're going to go in there, what size of the valve you might need, what might go wrong. So it's almost like in a flight simulator, even before you do that. So I found that personally exciting. Okay, we have a comment here from Dr. Dagash again. In the future, we might have human factors and AI factors, both under the usability umbrella, especially when ML kicks in fully and it's validated as effective and safe. That's an interesting notion of thinking about AI factors. And, I wonder if we are here talking about really a new way of looking at this interaction that we have not even imagined. We don't even have, in some way, I think we don't even have vocabulary or terminology to talk about this, right? So, Jonathan, let's continue. I want to move into this now, how you see the future evolving of the field, right? I mean, this is a very exciting time to be in human factors. How do you see it evolving? And particularly my question to you would be in the context of what skills do you think all of us practitioners would need to build to be successful in this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think we are at a very interesting and exciting time for the medical device industry in general and human factors in particular, because I think AI is part of a kind of paradigm shift in terms of how people interact with and think about technology. And of course, there are lots of positives and negatives that can come along with that. But I think people involved in human factors and more broadly in risk management and quality and regulatory work are in an interesting position to help the kind of evolution and adaptation of AI in a very safety-oriented and user-oriented way. I think that the key skills that are going to become essential for both human factors individuals and other people working with the human factors individuals on medical devices is going to be related to creativity and collaboration. With creativity, I think that our ability to think about both things that can go wrong in terms of potential use errors, potential misuses that can occur with technology, to think broadly and diversely about things that can happen is going to be essential for us to be able to mitigate against some of the risks that might be very difficult for us to imagine right now. Because when we're encountering new technologies, we haven't yet thought about all the different ways that they could be misapplied and misused or even used incorrectly. And so I think there's a need for creativity in general about thinking both how these technologies could be misused and then thinking creatively about how we can protect from the risks that can occur with them in a way that still enables the technology to really empower clinicians and patients. So I see creativity as being one way in which we'll need to keep developing and think beyond just the kind of systematic processes that have been adopted by the FDA and other regulators, which have been very good for human factors overall, but I think it has led some teams to think in a very linear manner about human factors. And we need to kind of go back to think about the users as humans that can be messy and unpredictable and diverse and do things that don't seem quite rational and logical at first, and really take all those variations into consideration when we're thinking about the products that we're designing. So that's one. Yeah.
I like that. I think creativity is definitely going to be required, but I feel like it is such a fuzzy concept for a lot of us to understand. Many times we imagine, right, we have to be an artist or we have to be a designer to be creative. But my interpretation is very simple. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, is that the ability to connect the dots is, to me, more important than anything else, because it is our ability to connect the dots in seemingly kind of disconnected domains or seemingly disconnected points. We have to see the relationships. This is where my mind goes when I hear you say creativity. Am I in the kind of right direction, or do you have some other nuance to that?
I think you are moving in the right direction, because when I talk about creativity in the context of human factors, I'm talking about recognizing the diversity that exists out in the user population. So thinking about all the different user characteristics that could lead to novel use areas that maybe hadn't been considered before. So you are connecting the dots between a user who maybe didn't get enough sleep, working their 14th hour of their shift in a department where they have one distraction after another, and they're working with a new device that's just been introduced, and it has an AI assistant that they've never seen before. So creativity in the sense that we are open to looking at a lot of different factors that can affect how people interact with products and thinking about them in a way that does what you said, that connects the dots and tries to think about how things can go wrong, but also go well when we're designing medical devices.
I think you also brought up another excellent point, which I want to double click on that, is seeing the humanity of people who are going to be using these products and devices, whether they are patients or nurses or professionals or doctors. In the world of AI, where, we seem to be moving away from those human connections, my feeling is that we have to double down on that. And that is where we have to think about what it means to be a human using these devices, which are more and more opaque to us or sophisticated to us. They are brilliant. They do good work, but we don't understand enough how they work. How do we build that? So here, I think Phil is sharing with us an interesting comment. Funny enough, I feel AI is going to add another layer of use error due to human use combined with machine use. And we are maybe thinking that, hey, there's a new territory here that we are not even aware of. But to me, it seems like it's more on our humanity that we have to emphasize and focus on and be more human, right? The human experience will help inform our judgment, will help us inform where we go next. And then we can tailor how the AI should respond. So I have a feeling we need to emphasize that we are in control. It's not like we're going to be losing all control. Do you have any thoughts on that? How can we continue to believe in it where there are so many forces against us?
Yeah, it's a really complicated challenge, I think. And it's one that's going to be practically impossible to resolve in the short term, because the types of changes that we're seeing that are being thrust upon people very rapidly. So if you think about all the different LLMs that have been coming out in the last few years with drastic changes, and now agents that are coming out that have a lot of effects, and they're kind of slowly finding their way into medical technology. We don't yet know what effect they're going to have on people's feelings as clinicians or as patients, whether they will actually feel empowered or whether they are feeling like suddenly they're just moving along widget in the factory as opposed to doing deep work. And it's going to be a bit of a long-term change where I think there will be a need for newer type of research methods potentially, and maybe a bit of a mindset change within human factors about what types of techniques we need to evaluate usability and to evaluate use safety. For example, some of the risks that we have with AI related to habituation are very difficult to evaluate in a conventional usability test where somebody comes into a lab and sees a product for the first time, interacts with it for an hour or two, and that's it. Some of the types of issues related to habituation and AI might take a long time to build up. And it could be that we'll need more longitudinal evaluation methods to detect them and to work around them. So I don't have any immediate answers yet because there is so much changing. And I think it will take a bit of time for us to see how users and people more broadly adapt to some of these really significant changes.
Yeah. What I find exciting in this is that, yes, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities. And if it is a little bit amorphous and vague and not very clear, I think that is where, to your point, creativity plays a role. And we have an opportunity here to sort of do something that has not been done before. So, Jonathan, I know we are coming close to our 30 minutes, and I do not want to miss this opportunity to ask you one more question about this workshop you are planning in this upcoming Boston Conference for Medical Device Safety. Tell us a little bit about what you have in mind and what are you most excited about?
Sure. So I'm going to be delivering a workshop together with Shannon Hosty at the International MedTech Safety Conference. It'll take place in Boston in June. Our workshop is on June 2nd. The conference as a whole is from June 2nd to 5th, and it has a really excellent lineup. So I encourage people to take a look at medsafety.net if they haven't heard about the conference yet. Our workshop specifically is really going to be a deep dive into more advanced human factors topics. So really looking at a lot of the challenges that teams face when it comes to understanding use-related risks, looking at both quantitative and qualitative data, looking at different methods to incorporate data into the product development effort and developing a very solid risk file. And we're going to treat it as a kind of interactive clinic where we try to share our best practices that we've gained over the years and learn also from the folks in the audience and help them work through challenges that they're facing on a regular basis. So it should be an exciting workshop.
I can already tell. I think it's going to be awesome, guys. If you are interested in that, please visit the website that Jonathan mentioned. I'll also put that in the show notes. Use this opportunity to engage with the best in the field in the risk management, human factors area. And I hope you look at that. Jonathan, I want to give you a couple of minutes to think about a few key points you can share with us as key takeaways from our conversation today. In the meantime, I'll share with you guys, a very exciting announcement. I've been super excited about this. I've been working on this mini project for a few months now. I'm going to be launching what I call an AI-powered risk coach. And the way it's different is compared to, let's say, ChatGPT or other LLMs, is that those LLMs are based on what is publicly, openly available, which is actually a very small portion of the human knowledge that we have. What I have done is I've customized this LLM, trained it, using my own understanding and knowledge and experience of applying risk management, grounded in 14971 for the last 10 plus years, and also teaching about it and writing about it. And what this is really is a decision engine, not a compliance engine, but it doesn't substitute for your professional judgment, but it helps you feel a little bit more confident about making that judgment. Because let's face it, they probably have great documentation on risk management, but when it comes to making a risk-based decision in practice, it's quite challenging. So this risk coach can help you with that. I'm super excited about it. There'll be a limited launch happening next week. And if you're interested in trying it out, just reach out to me and I'll share more information with you. So with that, Jonathan, the floor is yours. Please share just a few key takeaways with us.
Sure. Thank you, Naveen. I think the main takeaway is not a new one. It's one that human factors professionals have been preaching for forever, which is to remember that the focus of our work should be the user and that we should be looking at users as humans and thinking about the characteristics that they have that affect how they interact with the medical devices that we're working on. So I think especially in these days where so much of the conversation is focused around AI and technology and what it brings to medical devices, we have to remember to keep asking what it is that users and patients need from the devices to provide to them and what role they can continue to serve together with AI or with any other technology that we bring into our products that will really make the clinical outcomes as strong as possible. So that's one takeaway. And the other one is that in this time of great change from a technological point of view, we do have to remember the fundamental strengths of some of the core human factors activities like use-related risk analysis and what they can bring to our consideration of AI technology. So I think even though there is, as I said earlier, a need to think more long-term about certain issues, we also need to not forget a lot of the fundamental tools that we have that we can still refine and perfect as we work on new technology and to do it collaboratively. Because I think the best work is done when QA and RA and human factors and risk management and safety and engineering all put their brains together and complement what they're all doing.
This is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. In some ways, we have to stick with the basics and be open to learning, being creative, solving new problems. What a wonderful message to close with, Jonathan. I want to thank you for the time you have spent with us, sharing your insights. I feel inspired about this. I feel quite fired up and quite inspired for the new world that is coming. And I hope all of you in the audience feel the same. Guys, I want to thank you also for joining again. Week after week, you are showing up. This is your forum. This is the reason why we do this. So please reach out to me anytime if you have any feedback to share, any comments, questions, or suggestions to make. Or if you want to participate as a guest speaker in our conversation. It requires no preparation at all. In fact, we talk about these topics in a very casual way. So if you are interested, please reach out to me and we'll work it out in our calendar. So thanks everybody for joining again. And I look forward to seeing you next time.